My name is Toby Hoy, and I am the Lodge Advisor in the SIPO Lodge of the Order of the Arrow and the Buckeye Council. And our session here is going to be succession planning. So hopefully, when you agreed to take whatever role you have in the scouting program, if you are the Cub Master at Pack 123 or the Troop Committee Chair of Troop 123 or the Crew Advisor of Crew 123, or you're the Council President or the whatever it is, that you had a plan for what happens when you are not going to be that anymore. This is where I think a lot of folks, and myself included in the past, that I have learned from this particular mistake in the past, is you don't think of who's going to come after you. Nobody, well, not nobody, very few people want to be the Scoutmaster of Troop 123 for the next 35 years. Few people want to be the district chair of the Giant Wookiee Monster District for 35 years. Some folks happened to stay in that position for that long. I'll be honest, the Scoutmaster of mine when I was a youth was still the Scoutmaster of that unit up until a couple years ago, and there was a number with a 3 and a 0 in the front of it in between those two things, and I got to give him 19 kinds of props for doing that. But it does also like me point out that he is old and decrepit, and he really gets a kick out of me saying that for him. So either way, nobody wants to be in that role forever. So this is how we try to make forever a defined time period. So what are we going to talk about for our session today is, first of all, until we can determine what succession planning is, it's really hard to do until we know what it is we're going to do. So a quote I found from a 2017 Scoutcast episode was to proactively ensure that you have all the needed capable in case something changes to keep your unit running smoothly. So if you've had that Cub Master of Pack 123 who's been there for a decade, he or she may do an absolute rock star job, but what happens if their job moves them away? What happens if they have an unfortunate family situation that causes them to have to step down with minimal warning or minimal notice? For any of you that perhaps your job role includes managing other people, if you had a key employee that dropped out tomorrow, quit no notice, or I don't want to make light of the plague, but if they got abducted by aliens, horrible car accident, who knows what, and didn't show up to work tomorrow, how difficult would it be to replace them? So these are the types of things that you need to consider in the scouting program to make sure that the unit continues to run. It's all about the unit. It's all about the scouts in the program. It's not about who has the Scoutmaster patch on their sleeve, or who has the Cub Master patch on their sleeve, or who has the district chairman patch on their sleeve, or whatever it is. Nobody, I would venture to say, nobody who's had that patch on their sleeve for any appreciable amount of time wants to keep that patch on their sleeve forever. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So it's a process. It's not something that you can do in one fell swoop. It's not something that you can put together in a half hour. You can certainly give it a start at that point, but it's an ongoing process that in theory never stops. It needs to go and go and go, because folks are going to either need or going to want to move through the program and find something new, find something different, find something that's a little more challenging than the last thing they did, so that they can continue to grow and improve and develop themselves as well. So the first step is to identify your needs. Next step would be to assess those you have in the queue. And then third, to go and recruit those individuals that you have determined in steps 1 and 2. So it's not as easy as that. So you're going to need to find both the adult leaders that are in the unit already. I'm going to use a unit as an example, but the same thing applies whether it's a pack, a troop, a crew, a Sea Scout ship. It also applies to a district committee or a council committee of any variety. The whole thing can happen in any committee. This can work in any other organization you're in, whether you're in any of the fraternal organizations, the Eagles, the Moose, the Elks, the Lions, the pick your thing. I'm not sure how it works in things like a VFW post or things of that nature, but any volunteer organization that happens, whether it's a church committee or anything else, always is looking for more people to get involved. Rarely do I see anybody that says, nope, we got everybody, we don't need any more help. What a high class problem that would be to have. So, but it's not just finding any adult or any parent. We need to have some caveats to that. So, adult leaders and parents who are ready and able to either step into that job or step up to the next job. If they don't want to do it, if you have to twist somebody's arm and convince them and beat them up and beg, borrow, or steal, they're probably not the best fit for that job. So that is something to consider right then and there. Otherwise, it's a recipe for disaster. You also don't want somebody in that job who is just going to be a name on a form. If they're not going to actually do the work, this is Toby's personal opinion. If they're not going to do the work, I don't want you in the slot. That's Toby's personal opinion. That may or may not work for you. So one size for this does not fit all. It's not going to be the same in every unit. So succession planning, it needs to somewhat be unit specific. While all Scouts BSA troops do, for the most part, the same things, all Cub Scout packs do, for the most part, the same things, venture crews do, for the most part, the same types of things, we don't all do them exactly the same way. So just because something worked in pack 1, 2, 3 in the giant Wookiee monster district doesn't mean the exact same steps are going to work for pack 3, 2, 1 in the small Wookiee monster district. So they could, but doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work that way. So keeping in mind that you do have to tailor this a little bit to what your individual unit's needs are. Keeping in mind that units are, oddly enough, a lot like people. Every unit out there, whether it's a pack, a troop, a crew, a ship, or whatever, every unit has its own personality and its own way of doing things. Not to say that any one of those is better or worse than others, but they're all slightly different. And just because you did something that worked out really well for one pack in one area doesn't mean that you can use the same set, the same plan, the same tactic, the same person in the same role in a different Cub Scout pack. For any of you that have lived in multiple parts of the country and have moved around, and you might find things that because it's happened, and I don't mean to really make light of this, but because it's happened for 95 summers in the Buckeye Council this way, doesn't mean that somebody else does it the same way. So neither of those is better or worse. They're just different. So succession planning isn't really a singular activity or an event. Activities and events are more project-oriented. They have a defined start date and a defined end date. Hey, we're going to go camping at such and such, and we're going to go this weekend in July, or this weekend in September, or whatever, and we're going to leave the church at 5 p.m. on Friday and be home by 11 on Sunday and such and such, and then we're done, right? Succession planning is an ongoing with almost with no end type process. So it always should be, in theory, to make it work really, really well, be reworked and reviewed and tweaked and updated as the unit progresses through its life cycle. If it's a brand new unit startup, it may need a lot more things at the beginning than it does if that unit's been there for 75 years. So there are some things that happen in one and not in the other. So it all starts with planning and positions. What positions do we have and how are we going to fill them? That turns into recruiting those adults that are talented and willing to step up into one of those roles. It doesn't do you much good to recruit adults if you don't know what positions you have open yet. It's like saying, hey, we need help. Okay, what do you need help with? Stuff. Well, nobody wants to respond to stuff. A lot of people will help you if you just ask and present them with the expectations of what it is they're going to do. So that then moves into training them, mentoring them, enabling them to actually fulfill the position that you have recruited them for. That then maybe lets you start being a little more or a little less involved and empowering them to do the job. Nobody, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but most folks don't like to be micromanaged. If you hire the right people for the job, get out of their way. Toby's personal opinion. Get out of their way. If they're doing the job, don't wreck it. And then once that happens, you're going to have adults that are going to retire, and I use retire in quotes because scouters never really leave the program. They just move on to different things. So they're going to phase out of the parts of the program as a whole. At some point, people are going to stop showing up. So we have to plan for what happens when that happens. So where do we start in this process? It doesn't really start with the people. We don't want to target the people first. The first thing we have to do is identify the requirements of the position. Think of it as a job description. What time do you have to be there? When do you have to show up? How often? What are you required to do? How do you there? So on and so forth. What does your unit need? Not every unit is going to have the same vacancies. So what vacancies are there in your unit? Does your unit have an operating manual? And it doesn't have to be a 500-page document that describes everything under the sun, including the recipe for Scoutmaster, Mr. Smith's famous pot roast in a Dutch oven, whatever. It doesn't have to include things like that. Some basic stuff of what do we do and when. And this can then turn into how do we solve problems down the road, but that's a whole different discussion topic. So in that operating manual, do we have position descriptions? What's the job of the Scoutmaster? What is the job of the committee chair? What is the job of the unit treasurer, if there is one, or does the committee chair have do that role? Is there a separate advancement chair? Is there somebody that coordinates just Eagle Board in a Scouts BSA troop? Is it somebody that coordinates Weeblos to Scout transition in a Cub Scout pack? Who does what and when, including who is in charge of bringing the cookies to every meeting? Because cookies make everything better. So those are some of the formal positions and also the informal positions. This can also apply to the youth side as well. This is going to be more so on the Scouts BSA troop or on the Venture Crew scenario, more so than in the Cub Scout pack. But if you're going to ask Johnny Scout or Janie Scout to be the SPL, they should hopefully darn know what they're getting into. I will tell you that one thing that we did in the Order of the Arrow a couple years ago is the Order of the Arrow is youth-led with adult supervision or adult guidance. The way it was explained to me after I agreed to take the job, somebody pointed to the lodge chief at the time and said, he's in charge, but you're responsible. And then that sunk in. And then I was a little scared for a minute. But until you know what you're signing up for, it's kind of hard to do it. So one of the things that we did, we put out job descriptions for each of those youth positions in the lodge. And the youth that wanted to run for that position not only had to read the form and sign it and say, yes, I read this, I understand it, but we required also that a parent, if they were under 18, agree to that as well, because they're going to be the ones who's going to have to drive them all over the place. Assuming we get out of the era of plague and we can actually go back to face-to-face stuff, they're going to be the ones that are going to have to schlep them all over the place to do these different things. And also the unit leader had to agree to it as well, so that way we didn't have issues where somebody wanted to be the SPL at Troop 123 and also wanted to run for Lodge Chief, because that's going to be a recipe for disaster for both of us. So position descriptions for both the youth and the adults. So if you're going to ask someone to help you out, they might want to know what they're getting themselves into. Don't recreate the wheel for this. These job descriptions or position descriptions, they exist out there on the internet somewhere. So you can R&D, which is not research and development, it's rip off and duplicate, or case, copy and steal everything. Somebody has already come up with these. They're out there on the web somewhere. Spend a little bit of time on the Googly or whatever your favorite search engine is, and you will find these, and you can then tweak them to make them appropriate for your unit as a whole. So some formal position examples might be the Cub Master or Scout Master, the Crew Advisor, the Ship Skipper, the Committee Chair, the Treasurer, the Advancement Chair, things of that nature. Some of those informal positions might be an activity coordinator, a hospitality coordinator who brings the cookies, the most important part of the meeting. The carpool coordinator, again, assuming we're ever out of the era of plague, we can go back to carpooling again. Who organizes that? If your unit might have its own personalized neckerchief. I know the unit that I was in as a youth, we had a standardized neckerchief. Who makes those? Someone's going to have to do that. And I'll be honest, that's not a skill set that I have. The last time I tried to sew a patch on a sleeve, I ended up sewing my hand inside the sleeve and I had to cut it off, and it was very terrifying. I don't ever touch a needle and thread again. So I'm not going to be the neckerchief maker for our troop, but who is? So you start again with those position descriptions. And I've got just some screen grabs. If I went onto the Googly and just Googled these types of things and found these examples out there. So they're out there. You just have to go and look for them. So you might have a roster of positions. So who is the current unit committee chair in this example, or who's the scout master? Who's his or her backup? If he gets abducted by aliens the night before the camp out to wherever it is we're going, who's going to fill in that role? So who's the backup for all of these different things? Who also then was the previous person? So maybe our primary person runs into a problem and they might need some help. They might want someone to bounce an idea off of. It might not be a bad idea to have who the last person was who did that job, along with the name and a phone number and an email address for all of those different things. Or in the event your primary neckerchief maker gets abducted by aliens and the secondary neckerchief maker has to step up, who should he or she reach out to might be the prior neckerchief maker in that example. So you're then going to get those lists of what is the expectations for those youth positions. So this example is Troop 888, the leadership responsibilities for the patrol leader. What do they do? When does that term run? Does it run? Some units do January to December. A lot of units do a summer camp to summer camp. Do they run elections annually? Do they run them semi-annually? How often do those roles change out? So same thing for youth, same thing for adults. It might not be a bad idea to set out those expectations, because if you didn't tell folks what was expected of them, how do they know if they're doing the job properly? How do you address it if they're not doing the job properly, if they didn't know what the job was to begin with? So effective leaders, they don't grow on trees. You can't just go out in the field and chop one down and take it home with you. They're not like dandelions. They don't keep coming back. You have to cultivate them. You have to find them. They do not just grow on trees. And we're going to keep our tree metaphor going through the entirety of the remainder of this discussion. So they don't grow on trees. You find them by growing and developing adults the same way you grow and develop the scouts in your unit. Most of us who have been involved in the program for a long while saw that tenderfoot scout that crossed over into you, or that scout that crossed over into your troop from a Cub Scout pack or whatnot, and you saw them, and maybe you saw something in them that, like, hey, this is going to be a good kid down the road. Let's find a way to make him or her into a good kid. So those same skills happen with the adults. So it requires a couple different things. Just like with trees, right? You're going to have to exert a little bit of influence on them. It requires some persistence. They might not say yes at the beginning. And it helps if you follow a plan. We've all received those annoying telemarketing phone calls about your car's extended warranty or whatever it is, that's the flavor of the month for the companies. Again, those companies have a plan, and they're calling people for a reason, and they're doing it on a schedule. But if you annoy them like the car warranty people do, eventually they're going to block your phone number. So you don't want to harass that parent or that other adult in the unit every single day. You might want to have a schedule for that. So a plan isn't a bad thing. It's going to require some nurturing. You want to help get adults actively involved in working with the Scouts. I don't know of a lot of adults who signed up that says, yeah, I want to be the paperwork person and fill out forms all the time. That might be someone's thing, and if so, please point them in my direction. I have a job for them. But most folks get involved in the program to work with the Scouts directly. So that is 99 times out of 100 going to be your best starting point, is to get them involved with the youth in the program. Adults certainly learn by hands-on experience as well. There's a lot of skills that I've picked up over my time in the scouting program that I would not have picked up otherwise. I've learned them by doing. I learned them because somebody showed me how to coordinate this, or how to do that, or how to make this. So it's certainly a helpful thing. And for heaven's sake, please and thank you are your fertilizers in this scenario. You get somebody to help you do something, the best thing you can ever do is certainly say thank you. And I'll be honest, a handwritten thank you note will go leaps and bounds in getting them to come back and help you again. So you need to plant, keeping on with our tree mentality, our tree metaphor here, you're going to need to plant some seeds and plant some saplings to help grow those adults from that parent who shows up at that Tiger Den meeting to the future district commissioner of the giant Wookiee monster district down the road. So you're going to have to feed and protect them a little bit. If you ever grown a tree from a sapling, you know you can't just put a sapling in the ground because some woodland creature is going to come by and eat it, or someone's going to mow it over. Who knows what? You're going to have to protect it a little bit and feed it and get it nurtured. So that can start with some training. Youth protection obviously needs to happen before they actually get registered, but that position-specific training, whether it's den leader training, cub master training, assistant scout master training, whatever it is, get them trained in that position. It will help them. It will help improve their scouting experience by leaps and bounds if they know what they're doing, as opposed to just, hey, you're the Tiger Den leader, go do it. We can help them. If you just do the hey, go do it, it's a recipe for failure. So encourage them to continue with ongoing training. So things like roundtables, things like BPI or University of Scouting, depending upon what it's known at in the council you're in. Supplemental scouting training, there's tons of stuff online. Send them the wood badge. Send them to any kind of training thing you can find. Nobody left a training event that I know of worse off than when they started. So you almost can always pick up something everywhere. So help them get the materials and the resources and review it with them. Somebody agrees to be the den leader, the wolf den leader in pack 123. Wouldn't it be great if they had a binder or a PDF file that you could give them and say, here's everything you need. Make it easy. If they don't have to go and search and find it, if you make it easy, they'll more than likely have more success at it and will continue in that role, and you won't have to replace them in 2 months. So you don't have to go and repeat this process over and over and over again. So you're going to have to provide some guidance and some feedback, and you can utilize the EDGE method, which we can talk about that later if you have questions, to help get them going in that position. Start them off with smaller jobs. No, very few people are going to volunteer to be the Scoutmaster or the Cub Master right out of the gate and have never been involved in the program before. You can use the Oreo method. And there was a great article in Brian on Scouting a handful of years ago about the Oreo cookie method. You ask that one parent who shows up and says, hey, can you bring Oreos to the next pack meeting or the next den meeting? Most folks won't have a problem stopping and getting a box of cookies to bring to the next meeting. You get them to do that, you can then get them to bring something else and something else. It's almost like the mafia. If you've ever seen The Godfather, well, part 3, we don't talk about part 3 very often, but that scene where Michael says, I thought I was out and they bring me back in, you want them to stay in. You never want them to get out. You always want them to find something to do. And the easiest way to do that is with smaller jobs with a den or a patrol. It's a lot easier task for an adult to take on, especially if they don't have a lot of experience in the program in the past. So it's a great way to get them hooked and get them locked in. So you want to be prepared. Those new adult leaders that you've recruited, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to foul up. You learn more from your mistakes. I firmly believe this. You learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. Let them fail. Let them make their mistake, but be ready to help. Be ready to help pick them up. Be ready to help solve that problem that may have happened so that it doesn't happen again and they can grow from that experience. So once you have started to plant those seeds and saplings and they're starting to get there, you're going to have to maintain that forest a little bit. You're going to have to develop those leaders in your unit into more better, that's not even good grammar, more capable, more adequate, more dedicated leaders. You do that by providing support and encouragement to them. You're going to help to create mentors because eventually those folks that you're starting with today are going to be the mentors for the folks that are going to start in that pack or in that troop in 3 years, in 4 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. They're the ones that are then going to be doing this job and maintaining that adult leadership roster in the unit. So you can find that adult who's maybe been around for a while to help co-lead that that den or that unit or whatever with somebody who's brand new. Help give them that mentor, that I don't want to say crutch, that's not a good word for it, but that helping hand to get them through those first couple of weeks or first couple of months until they kind of get their feet under them a little bit and can take over by itself. Division of labor is a huge benefit here by making sure that not any one person gets sucked into doing everything. Chop it up and make it a little more manageable. It's the whole eating an elephant type thing. So you want to pair up those who excel with certain things with those who might not be that good at doing something. There's a running joke at camp about Toby and a tractor. Toby running a tractor is a very bad thing. So we found somebody who was good at running a tractor that could help show Toby how to run the tractor. And that still didn't work well, and Toby doesn't touch the tractor ever since. But somebody who's never touched a tractor in their life, you don't want to say, here's the keys, go run the tractor and do whatever. So you want to help mesh up those folks who do really well with certain tasks with those who don't. Not everybody is a paperwork type of person, but you might find somebody who says, yeah, I'll help out with the paperwork, but you might need to find somebody who knows how to do those forms and when to file, where to file, how to file, etc., with that newer person to help teach them and show them how to do that and help bring everybody along in our plan. If at some point somebody feels they've not done a good job, whether they did or did not, they may have done an adequate job, they may have got the job done, but if they feel like they didn't do it right, you need to be able to provide that help and support to lift them up. So say, hey, it wasn't that bad. Let's make it even better the next time. Everybody has a down day, but you don't have to stay there. So just like we do with our scouts, you want to maintain that positive momentum with the adults in our unit as well. And sometimes those trees are going to fall down. You're going to have units that are going to retire. And again, I use retire in air quotes. This is not like a job where you do your 30 years at wherever, assuming anybody does 30 years at a place anymore. Folks are they're going to get a little long in the tooth and might not be wanting to go camping every month anymore. Or they're going to be in that role for a while and they might want something different. So you're going to need to find somebody to take that job next. This happens a lot more, unfortunately, on the Cub Scout side than it does on the Scouts BSA side. Because a lot of times folks will join with their tiger, and once their tiger crosses over into the Scouts BSA after going through wolf and bear and weed blowing, etc., that parent is likely going to move along with their scout. So that's almost an automatic retirement, per se, on the Cub Scout side. So there's some obvious and some not so obvious reasons for that to happen. Again, the parents with scouts, they cross over. What happens when that scout gets his or her eagle or ages out of the program? What happens to that parent now? Do they stay involved? Were they that hooked and they stay? And there are a lot of folks that do. Or do they kind of stop showing up a little bit after their scout is no longer involved in the program? So those are some pretty obvious reasons why some folks age out. Leaders need a break sometimes. This is also known as burnout. You've been the whatever for so long, you are just sick and tired of it. And at some point, you stop becoming effective in that role because you're just miserable and it becomes a chore to go to that meeting, or a chore to organize the popcorn sale, or a chore to do whatever it is, and you just get sick of it, and then you don't do as good of a job. And then who suffers there? It's not the adult, even though, yeah, they're suffering, but it's the scout in the program that didn't get the benefit of the adult who was going at it full bore. So there's also leaders who could do more. Sometimes they get bored or they're underutilized in the role that they are in. So there are some folks that maybe you get them on that Oreo cookie program and they've done that now for a while, but they could do, we all know that person that could do a lot more. And there are some folks that if that's their limit, if the cookies are the limit for them, not saying that they mean and nasty, but if that's their reason or that's their issue, then great. Don't give them more than they can handle. But at the same time, somebody who's in the cookie role that could be doing 28 more things or something that takes a little more time, let's get them moved on to the plan and get them up there. So sometimes leaders have a change in their personal life. Their job may have changed. They may have had some health issues. They may have had some family changes. They may have a new addition to their family, whether it be a newborn child or what happens a little more nowadays is they have that adult parent, the grandparent in this scenario, the adult parent that comes back. We're starting to see a lot more 3 and 4 generational households that are out there. So that might become a thing where if they have to care for or provide some form of care for an aging parent in some shape or not, that may change what they can do with scouting, what they can do with all manner of things. They may have had some other health issues that have cropped up. Who knows what happens? So if folks have to choose between their family or the scouting program, they're likely going to, and I would venture to say they should, choose family as opposed to the scouting program at that point. But who knows what it is? There could be all manner of things that could change. So we need to find those leaders who can help mentor their successor. Find out who's going to do your job next. Find out that small group of adults in the unit who are going to take this succession planning on. And then also they find out who's going to take the succession planning on from them. It works both ways. So is who's always going to do this? It doesn't have to happen every single month. Maybe that succession planning or nominating committee in the unit or the district or whatever, maybe they meet quarterly, maybe annually. Annually might not be enough. Maybe every 6 months might not be a bad thing. Maybe once during the holidays and once in the summer. Who knows, right? Whatever the time slot is, doesn't matter. However often it needs to happen will become evident by how many positions that the unit or the group has to fill. So the next thing that everyone should think about is when are they going to rotate out? How long are you going to be in that role, and how do you help the unit transition you out of that role? Some of the more successful units that I know of have set term limits for the unit leader or the committee chair or a handful of other things. It's a lot easier to find somebody to say, yeah, I'll be the scoutmaster, and I know it's only going to be a 2-year hitch or a 3-year hitch or whatever it is. Yeah, I can carve that time out as opposed to that open-ended thing of when will it ever stop. So that may or may not work great in your scenario. Neither is better or worse. It's just a thought. So at the same time, you personally need to know when to say when. When are you going to step down from that role and carve it in stone? I'll give you a personal example. I was the district chair for almost 10 years, and I had been trying to get out of that job after about 7. And it just never happened and never happened and never happened because nobody else stepped up until I carved it in stone and said, May 31st, that is my last day. I happened to be at camp that weekend for an OA event, and we ceremoniously took a pocket knife and we cut the stitching off that patch off of my sleeve on Saturday night at the campfire and burnt the patch. It was the only way that I could do it was to carve it in stone and then stop doing that job. So it kind of then forces somebody else to step up a little bit. So a couple other things to do in that case is to communicate with the committee and the parents if that's applicable. So if you're the Cub Master and say, hey, I know I'm going to have this life change event that's going to happen this fall, as the example. my last day is going to be July 31st, or maybe it's after day camp in this example, or whatever it is. I need to let everybody know when that is so that they have as much notice as possible. Again, if I use the employee-employer example, how many of you that have managed folks in the past, if someone doesn't give you a notice of some variety, if they just walk out in the middle of the shift, that's a problem, right? Dependent upon the job. So you don't want to have somebody in the scouting program that just walks off in the middle of the shift. The more notice they have, the better it's going to be for the unit and easier it is going to be to find to replace somebody. So you need to let them know from your personal standpoint that someone is going to have to step up. Otherwise, unfortunately, it's going to be the scouts in the unit that are going to take the brunt of that. So some specific ideas for the pack. You want to build from within, and sometimes you're going to have to volunteer somebody. A lot of parents are typically going to be reluctant to get involved at the beginning because they don't know what they're getting into if they have never been involved in the scouting program. So if they got to that joint scout night because their child came home from school with a flyer from the crazy DE who was there at lunch, assuming we ever go back to that, and they came home and shoved that flyer in the milk carton like they were told to do, oh goody, now I have a thing to do. If they've never been involved in the program, they might not know what to get into. So you're going to have to sometimes be very straightforward and be direct. Don't be wishy-washy about this. Adult participation on the Cub Scout side is expected. You will be here with your child. This is not the babysitters of America. This is the Boy Scouts of America. You're going to need to participate in some way, shape, or form. How do you want to do it? I've seen some folks who have taken all those new parents, all those new tiger parents, and locked them in a room and said, one of you is the den leader. Find out amongst yourselves and let the Cub Master know who it is before you leave. Somebody will step up. It will happen. It might be a little ugly, but someone's going to step up and take it on, and then you find that person and you build all the support mechanisms that we already talked about. So sometimes that assistant den leader may need to move to some pack leadership role. Maybe they're going to be the next Cub Master or the next assistant Cub Master or whoever it might would be. So for those families in the pack that don't have that formal leadership role, they can rotate through planning and implementing activities. So maybe someone's going to help coordinate the Pinewood Derby or the Rain Gutter Regatta or the whatever else it is that we're going to do for our pack during the program year. So those folks can help do other things as well if they're not going to be the den leader or not going to be the Cub Master or not going to be the whatever else it is. So some troop-specific ideas, and these can happen also on the venture crew a lot easier. There's the shotgun approach. There's the parent meeting and an email blast that says, hey, we need these things. It's expected, right? Can you help us out? And it doesn't really do that good, but it gets the information out there quickly. So how does the adult benefit? What are those skills needed? That job description we talked about. How much time does it take? If we need somebody to coordinate the popcorn sale, for example, that's an in and out, done in a couple months type thing, as opposed to somebody who's going to be the assistant scout master for advancement and who's going to be involved 12 months out of the year. So somebody who might have time to do something specific, but not a 12-month gig, it's a good idea to let them know what those requirements are. Next, there's the rifle approach. You're going to find somebody who you think might be good in that role, and you're going to lock them in a room. Now, all kidding aside, you're going to go directly to them and say, hey, I need this. I think you'd be a good fit for it. You have the skill set. You have the passion. Will you help me out? Yes, no. Plain as day, I need help. Will you help me? Most folks, if you ask them for help, are willing to help you. They just need to know what it is you need them to do. So again, like I mentioned before, those parents without that scouting background might be less likely or more reluctant to get involved because they don't know what they're getting into. So you're going to have to help them out a little bit. And maybe you work on getting a separate meeting for those newer or inactive parents to say, hey, we need some help. Someone's going to have to help with pancake breakfast or a spaghetti dinner or whatever else it is. Maybe you give them a specific task and help get them involved, add those mentorship roles that we talked about already, all manner of different things. And adults that are involved in the program, we all do this because we enjoy it. There is certainly no reason why there can't be an adults-only patrol in Troop 123 that makes some rock star food, right? Or maybe there's going to be an adult camp out weekend where the adults in the unit go and the scouts don't go, and you just have some planning and some, maybe you make it a work session or not, or we're just going to go and have fun. A lot of the friends I have, I've met in the scouting program, and we get together outside of the scouting program as well, and we've done it because of something like this. So there is an endless variety of trees or people out there and forests for you to go harvest those trees from. Adults learn the scouting method through experience. We learn by doing the same as the scouts do. Every unit's going to have a separate management style, and everyone's going to tweak their way a little bit about how to get parents involved. No way is right, no way is wrong. They're all a little bit different, and as long as it gets the job done, who cares? You want to be as transparent as possible with what the unit lead needs, and with what you're going to expect of those adults you're going to recruit in there. If people know what the job is, they're more apt to say, yes, I will help, than if you just say, hey, I need help. I can't stress that enough. Everybody on the primary leadership part of that unit, the unit leader, so the Cub Master, Scout Master, Crew Advisor, etc., the respective committee chair, the institutional head, everyone needs to have that radar on 24/7, 365 days out of a year. Every time somebody shows up might be a potential recruit. There should be an ongoing effort to build the adults that we have of who's going to be the next Cub Master, who's going to be the next Scout Master, etc. You got to start somewhere. Start tomorrow. That's all I'm going to say. Start tomorrow. Get it done. If you have questions about succession planning, again, I encourage you to go onto the internet, go onto the Googly and Google a lot of this type of stuff. You'll find a handful of different resources that are out there. If you have questions, you can certainly reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you any way I can. Toby at tobyhoyd.com, and we'll get your questions answered, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of virtual BPI.